Sergeant Daniel Kanipe's shocking account of Custer's last stand. Let's take a step back to a hot, dusty June in 1876. A time when the West was wild, uncertain, and dangerous. It was the tail end of an era, but no one knew that yet. Out there on the open plains, in the middle of all that tension between the U.S. Army and the Sioux and Cheyenne tribes, rode a man named Sergeant Daniel Kanipe, a name many don't know today, but one that deserves remembering. Kanipe was a cavalryman in Company C of the 7th Regiment, and on June 25, 1876, he found himself caught in the gears of one of the most infamous clashes in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Unlike most of his fellow soldiers, Kanipe lived to tell the tale. And what a tale it is. Before we get into the thick of it, take a second to support this project, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon if you want more honest, boots-on-the-ground history like this. We dive deep into the past here. Not with flashy gimmicks, but with grit and respect. The campaign really kicked off back in mid-May, 1876. The 7th Cavalry left Fort Abraham Lincoln under orders to bring hostile tribes back to the reservation system, something easier said than done. The soldiers rode hard, starting toward the Yellowstone River. By the end of the day, they'd made camp at Big Heart River after covering about 12 miles. Just men, horses, and the wide, open land ahead. As the days passed, they moved up to the Powder River. 6 companies, including Kanipe's, were ordered out on recon, scouting through rough terrain, hunting trails, and watching for signs of Indian movement. The men were loaded down with supplies for 10 days, lugged by stubborn pack mules that knew their job and little else. They eventually picked up an Indian trail along the Rosebud. That path led them deeper into contested territory, toward the Tongue River. They walked through the night, brewed black coffee under fading skies, and kept moving through dawn. Hard miles, and no one said much. There wasn't much to say. But by mid-June, it was clear they were running low on food. General Reno, commanding the scouting force, made the call to turn back. The recon team linked back up with General Terry and the rest of the regiment along the Yellowstone. That's when they found Custer. Now, Custer wasn't riding high at this point. Back east, he'd rubbed too many important people the wrong way, especially over corruption in the military post-supply system. He'd spoken out against shady dealings that lined the pockets of post-traders while shortchanging soldiers. President Grant didn't take kindly to it. Custer had been briefly sidelined, but now he was back, at least in part because he still had friends in high places. Even so, the tension was thick. Supplies came up from the Far West steamboat, 15 days of rations, 2 Gatling guns, and a pair of Rodman cannons. But Custer, always convinced of his instincts, decided to leave the heavy firepower behind. He handed the big guns off to General Gibbon, thinking he could move faster without them. Looking back, that was a costly mistake. Just one Rodman cannon or a Gatling gun might have sent those warriors scattering before a shot was fired. Some of us who survived know it in our bones. It wouldn't have been a massacre if we had the firepower with us that day. June 22 came. We broke camp, marching all day in silence. Custer had ordered no bugle calls from that point forward. All messages would be passed by hand. Fires were to be kept small, just enough to warm up the coffee. Everyone felt it, something was coming. We pushed hard on June 23, stopped near sundown, then picked up again on the 24th. That day we reached a spot where Indian warriors had recently held both a Sundance and a war dance. The signs were everywhere: flattened earth, cottonwood huts, and the unmistakable energy left behind when men prepare for battle. Crow scouts traveling with us spotted something grisly, a white man's scalp tied to a branch. Turned out it came from a soldier in Gibbon's command. The scouts, who hated the Sioux, broke into shouting and dancing at the sight. They were ready for war. The scalp was brought back to Custer, who examined it quietly before handing it around. By that evening, it ended up with Sergeant Finley, one of our own, who'd be dead within 24 hours. Late that night, the Indian scouts returned, faces grim. They had seen the size of the Indian village, and it was far larger than anyone had guessed. Still, we were told to pack up and ride. We moved under cover of darkness toward the Little Bighorn, guided into a coulee where we could rest unseen. But even the best-laid plans get thrown off by the smallest things. As we rode into the draw, one of the sergeants dropped hardtack from the pack train. Ordered to retrieve it, he found 2 Sioux helping themselves to the fallen bread. They ran off the moment they saw him, likely raising the alarm. When Custer heard, he knew the element of surprise was gone. Instead of waiting, he made the decision to strike that very day. Custer climbed a ridge with a few scouts and his bugler to assess the camp. When he came back, he split the regiment into 4 parts. Reno would take one wing, Benteen another. Custer held 3 companies for himself, while McDougal brought up the rear with the supply train. They'd try to hit the Indian camp from multiple directions, squeezing it between 3 prongs of the attack. It sounded good in theory. Reno crossed the creek first and ran straight into fierce resistance. The Indian warriors weren't running, they stood and fought. Custer's group veered off toward the northern end of the camp. Along the way, I spotted warriors high on a bluff, watching us. I pointed them out to Sergeant Bobo. Custer gave the order to advance. When we reached the top, the camp stretched out below like a city. Teepees as far as the eye could see. But the warriors had melted away again, into the folds of the terrain. The Crow scouts riding with us had a wild plan. They thought maybe they could sneak down toward the Indian village at dawn and make off with a few horses. A risky move, sure, but those fellas were born in the saddle and knew the terrain like the back of their hands. Still, it was a long shot. They made the attempt, but it ended the way most long shots do, in smoke and blood. The moment they were spotted, they were fired on. 2 of them didn't make it back. The others, Bloody Knife, Curly, and our lead scout, Mitch Boyer, returned shaken. They didn't say much, but their faces told the story. We weren't facing a ragtag band down there, this was a full camp, 1,000 strong. And we'd stirred the hornet's nest. We were still up on the ridge when 4 companies of troopers crested the bluff and caught sight of the village. You could feel the energy shift. Men stood in their stirrups, pointing, shouting. A cheer went up like it was a parade. But what we were looking at wasn't a prize, it was a problem. Rows of teepees stretched along the valley like white flames, and the movement among them, warriors mounting up, meant they already knew we were here. I remember glancing to my left and seeing Sergeant Finkel riding beside me. His horse was lathered in sweat, sides heaving. Finkel leaned in and hollered over the wind, "I can't hold this pace, my mount's giving out." I shouted back, "Stick with it if you can, Finkel." He dropped back a moment later. A twist of fate, that small moment likely saved my life. Right after that, Captain Tom Custer pulled alongside me. "Ride back," he ordered. "Find McDougal and the pack train. Tell him to bring the mules up to high ground. If the packs fall, leave them. Just move." That order changed my life. If Finkel hadn't dropped back, he would have been the one sent, and I would have ridden on with the rest, straight into the worst kind of slaughter. As I turned back, I looked over my shoulder and saw our men galloping toward the village. The air was thick with dust, and above it I heard General Custer call out, half joking, "Steady, boys. No need to hurry, there's enough Indians down there for all of us." He always had a way of trying to keep spirits high, even when the odds were long. Some of the troopers were so worked up their horses bolted ahead, charging past the officers like they were chasing glory. By the time I reached McDougal and passed along the order, things were already going sideways. Our companies had split, Custer went right, Reno went left. They were too far apart, and the enemy was already swarming between them. We'd underestimated the Sioux and Cheyenne, badly. They weren't scattered bands. This was a coalition, a real fighting force, and they knew this land better than any of us. From there, I was told to ride on to find Captain Benteen. I made it, but what I saw along the way chilled my blood. Reno's men were in full retreat. You could hear the war cries behind them, sharp and rising like wolves on a hunt. The skirmish had turned into a rout. McDougall's company joined them on the hilltop, trying to form a line. Our men were dropping all around, hit by bullets, arrows, lances. Some tried to crawl to safety. Others lay still, already gone. I saw Dr. DeWolf shot down just as he reached the rise. One more step and he might have lived. Indians burst over the crest then, dozens of them, screaming, firing, swinging rifles and clubs. I raised my weapon, ready to fire, but right as I took aim I saw the faces. They were our scouts. Crow and Arikara, running for their lives. Some tossed away their guns just to ride faster. They were terrified. That told me all I needed to know. We were in deeper than anyone had guessed. We pulled together with Benteen's men and formed a defensive line. It wasn't perfect, but it held. The hilltop became our fortress. We dug in, braced ourselves. That night was long and loud, war cries, gunshots, the moans of the wounded. No one slept. On the 26th, they came at us again. They had the high ground now and poured fire down like rain. We returned what we could, but it wasn't enough. 68 men wounded, many badly. We ran low on ammunition. Worst of all, no water. The river was 100 yards away, and those yards were death. The wounded begged. Water, they'd whisper, just a mouthful. You could feel your stomach twist hearing it. A few brave men tried. Some crawled under cover. Others ran, zigzagging like rabbits. A few made it. Others didn't. They died trying to bring back a canteen. The sun burned down on us. Horses lay dead across the slope. The smell, blood, sweat, dust, clung to your nose and never left. Flies gathered around the bodies. By afternoon, the dead outnumbered the living on that hilltop. I still remember the first shot I heard that day. It cracked past me and struck the dirt beside my horse's front hoof. Officers Harrington and Sturgis vanished, swallowed by the chaos. 14 enlisted men were never found. We heard later the Indians had put their heads on poles during the night, mocking us from the valley below. That day, 56 of our men were killed. By nightfall, the enemy began to move. We could see the village packing up. Women and children loading ponies, warriors still circling, making sure we didn't come down. But by dawn, they were gone. The entire village vanished like smoke. The morning of the 27th was quiet. We made coffee. We rationed what little water was left. Then, just after 10, we saw movement in the distance. At first, we held our breath. Was it more warriors? Then we saw the flag. Relief came riding in, General Gibbon's column, with General Terry at his side. You've never heard cheering like that. Men stood and wept. I saw General Terry dismount and walk through the wounded, eyes wet. We came as fast as we could, he said. You could hear the guilt in his voice. And then he told us, Custer and his command were gone. All of them. Not one had survived. They'd been found in the valley, some stripped, others mutilated. We'd feared it, but hearing it out loud hit like a blow to the chest. That afternoon, I joined Benteen and a small group to survey the battlefield. It was worse than we imagined. Bodies lay scattered across the ridges, many unrecognizable. I found Sergeant Finkel and Finley lying side by side. Finley had at least a dozen arrows in him. His horse, Carlo, lay dead nearby. Some men had been shot clean. Others were butchered, scalped, hacked, faces caved in. It was the women who had done the worst of it, coming in after the fight. Where the final stand happened, the bodies were in tight groups. Custer lay at the center, back arched over fallen comrades, shot through the chest. Near him were his brothers, Tom and Boston, and brother-in-law Calhoun. They'd made a final stand, but they'd been overrun. We estimated over 4,000 warriors had taken part in the fight, not counting the non-combatants. Their camp held maybe 12,000 to 15,000 people. Custer had around 200 men. The math didn't favor us. Not a single soul made it out, save one, Comanche, Captain Keogh's horse. They found him standing wounded, 7 bullet wounds in his hide. Somehow, he'd survived. That horse became a symbol. The army gave him a place of honor. He marched in parades, draped in black. They treated him better than most men. After the burial, we loaded our wounded onto the Far West steamboat. She'd made it upriver to meet us, and she ran fast, carrying the survivors to safety. It was a hard ride, but those who made it never forgot the boat that saved them. And the village? It was gone. Dissolved into the plains. Warriors scattered to the wind. We were in no condition to chase them. We'd buried our own and counted the cost. That valley was soaked in blood. That's how it went. Not some polished tale from a book, I was there. I rode with them. I saw what happened with my own eyes. And I lived to tell it. If you're still with me, thank you for listening. This country's history isn't always clean, but it's ours. And the men who fought that day, whether bluecoat or brave, earned their place in it. Until next time, stay sharp, take care of yourself, and remember those who never came back.